So next we have our keynote speaker. Ken Alex is the Senior Policy Advisor to Governor Jerry Brown and the Director of the Office of Planning and Research, which focuses on energy, environment, and land use issues. Ken's a graduate of Harvard Law School, holds a BA in Political Theory from the University of California at Santa Cruz, so please welcome Ken Alex.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Is that all right? All right, good afternoon. So I thought what I would do is talk a little more broadly than, I know this is aimed at energy efficiency, but I checked and most of you people work more broadly than just energy efficiency. So I wanted to talk this afternoon with a little more context around what we're thinking about and what we're doing on climate change, particularly at the Office of Planning and Research, but not exclusively. So I'll talk about the Brown administration's views and some of the things that we're doing. And I know that a lot of what we need to do lies with you all, with local governments. And part of what this administration is interested in doing is seeing if we can provide some of the tools to help with some of that, recognizing that this is a huge challenge and we all need to work together, of course, and find new and old ways both to get some things done, particularly at the local level. And I'll talk about some of the things that I think where the state can help locals and where locals can help the state. Let me see how I want to talk. So I think what I'll do is I'll talk for a while, and then maybe if you have some questions, we can do a little Q&A as well. I always hate kind of just talking endlessly in a room. So we're working on a vision of California moving to 50 million people. Right now we're at about 38 million people. So there are various estimates that have California at about 50 million people somewhere in the middle of this century. What does that mean for a state that obviously has limited resources, has all kinds of issues with water and land use, and oh, by the way, there's this little climate change problem that makes all of it more difficult. So the big picture is the population is growing. There are greater demands on everything that we do and on our resources. There are obviously increasing energy demands, and that's a whole subject unto itself. The climate change impacts include reduced snowpack, rising seas, greater fire damage, and a whole litany of other wonderful attributes of the coming storms. And by the way, we are supposed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 by 80% over 1990 levels. Now, since all of you in some way or another work on these issues, I don't really have to talk about how difficult of a set of challenges those are, but I sometimes like to ask people to think a little bit about what they would do in their own lives to get to 80 to 90% reduction of emissions for their own selves, as I kind of look here at the lighting system in this hotel. And the heating system and everything associated with this building. So these are very substantial challenges, and these changes have to occur in the lifetimes of many of you in this room. That is quite an extraordinary challenge that we're faced with. So it's sobering. On the other hand, there are changes in the air. The governor today challenged the nurses union to join him in climate change fight. And by the way, he will get very upset with me if I don't mention that on the governor's website and on OPR's website is a statement of scientists laying out some of the scientific issues and the scientific challenges, and we'd very much like you to sign it. If so, go take a look at it. It's a fairly depressing statement. On the other hand, it does include suggested solutions, and we're trying. The governor has been handing out this statement. We had it translated to Chinese. He gave it to the president of China. The president of China said that they would review it carefully and get back to us on some of the things that they're working on to deal with it and what they thought about it. He gave it to President Obama. Actually, he had to give it to the Secret Service agent. He couldn't give it directly to the... That's true, by the way. At any rate, we sort of know the outlines of the challenge we have. In California, emissions from greenhouse gases are 40% from the transportation sector, 30% from the energy sector. Buildings and residences are a significant percentage and have a connection to both of those things. So these are big challenges. They require some vision, planning, and working together, as I mentioned. What we're working on at OPR, I'll talk to you about sort of how we're approaching it, and hopefully some of these things will hang together and connect up to what you're doing as well. First, I want to mention the environmental goals and policy report. This is a statutory obligation of the Office of Planning and Research. We're supposed to do this every 4 years. The law was passed in 1970, and OPR has been on it ever since. There has been one environmental goals and policy report that has been completed in the years since 1970. And that was done in 1978. It's something, and that Governor Jerry Brown. Is called the Urban Strategy, and I commend it to you if you have not taken a look at it. It's about 50 pages long. You will find an incredible amount of resonance, particularly urban areas of the state. It's all about how we should be, in essence, doing infill, which is a theme that has come back around now 40 years later to be relevant even more so. I think Michael McCormick in one of the breakout sessions this morning talked about state goals that are in a 2002, state planning goals are in a 2002 statute. Those came from the 1978 urban planning strategy. So it was a document that the governor remembers fondly, and so what it's allowed me to do is to say, gee, we should really do another one, and we are, by the way, obligated to do one. So we're doing an extensive process, and we'll be announcing kind of what that outreach process will be, coming to a community near you soon, to talk about what the goals of the state should be out 20 to 30 years. What should the state look like in terms of the environment, and how do we measure it? So a big part of what this report will be how do we think about and how do we measure how we're doing in both sort of ways that we're used to, like, what's the quality of the water, and I think in some ways that we're not used to in terms of things like what various health indexes tell us. What does obesity tell us about the state of the environment? What are all kinds of measures about crime and safety, and then more things like vehicle miles traveled. So far, we gathered a couple thousand possible measures. We're going to narrow that down a bit. At any rate, part of it is what is the road to 2050? And 2050 is a bit too far out to really have a road that we can state with particularity. So what we're doing in combination with the scoping plan under AB 32, which I suspect most, if not all of you, are familiar with, is to think about what the interim targets are in the 2030 to 2035 range. How do we get to 2030 and 2035, assuming that we're doing reasonably well, which I think we are, on our way to 2020. So 2020 under AB 32, I'm sure everybody knows we have to reduce to 1990 levels by 2020. We have to be 33% renewables in our energy sector. We are well on our way to those goals, which is exciting. And I know some of the utilities are here, and I want to encourage you to go beyond the 33% before 2020. That's an ongoing set of issues that I think we'll be talking about as well. So some of the other things that we're doing along with the environmental goals and policy report, one thing that I'm fairly obsessed with is data. We are watching a data revolution. Google and its competitors have changed the world, basically. And oh, by the way, governments haven't. We are not very good at data. It turns out that there were something like 3,500 separate layers of geospatial data that different state agencies have. And each of them handled their data separately, and nobody knew what other agencies had. When we inventoried it, it turned out that different agencies had the same data and were paying separately for it. So now we have gathered all 3,500 layers, and there's something called the State Geo Portal. I recommend it to you. And it's going to include local data as well. It already does, and we're building it day by day. It's going to include federal geospatial data, and it will include NGO data as well. This is going to ultimately be a massive database. It's a pointer system, so you can look at a map and draw a circle around a location, and it will tell you all of the data available. Or you can do searches that are much more specific to what you may be interested in. I don't know where we're going with this, but I think it's a lot like Google, ultimately, that it will change how we think about information, and it will change how the public relates to things that are going on in the state. And I will mention a couple of things about it. First of all, part of what we're doing is looking at energy data, and the PUC is very interested and involved in this process. And LADWP has been working directly with UCLA, and now SCE is as well, which we appreciate, to identify energy usage in the Los Angeles area, something like at a census block level, where there are privacy issues that need to be addressed, and they are being addressed. So exactly the level of specificity is a little bit in flux. But right now you can go to a UCLA website and look at all kinds of interesting energy information, energy usage in LA. We very much want to make that statewide, and it's something that we're looking at, and I think it will have immediate impact on many of your communities when you have this data available. You'll be able to pinpoint areas that have significantly higher energy usage. We're tying it also to water data. It's tied to building size and location. There's all kinds of data that UCLA is going to be adding in layer upon layer, and I recommend you all taking a look at it if you're interested. Next up, we're looking at land use data, particularly at the parcel level. My hope is, before I'm done at OPR, that all of you have access to data at the parcel level on a consistent platform for every parcel in the state of California. I think that will help all of us with our jobs, and you can start thinking about what that might mean. And then we want to tie all of that to modeling tools, including one that the Strategic Growth Council funded and that OPR has been working with the developers quite extensively, as have many of the MPOs, including SCAG and SACOG, which is urban footprint. We think that this is a scenario-based modeling tool that has really interesting outputs in terms of planning and how you design for the future. What's the impact on tax revenues of a particular mix of residential and non-residential units, particular types of densities, transit-oriented proposals? What's the impact on crime, on health, on pollution? Well, urban footprint is designed to have that kind of output. And so when you start tying that then to things like the parcel level data, you can see how planning in the next decade is going to change. And we need to be ready for it, and we need to be, so our expectation and hope is to be able to provide the urban footprint model with training and with access to everybody. It's an open source product, and there will be, it's not that easy to use yet, but we're working on it. So these are pretty big changes that I think are coming, and it's things that we're very excited about. And we tie that to some of what we're doing on the general plan updates. I think many of you know that we're in the middle of a general plan guideline update. Our goal with the general plan, we've heard very loud and clear how difficult it is right now for your planning departments and doing general plan updates. And I always point out that Los Angeles is 38 years old, and one or two things have changed in Los Angeles since that was originally adopted. So we are very much, we very much hope that everybody will have an easier time doing general plan updates, and to that end, we'd like to see a shift to online updates, to moving things onto the web where possible, to tying it to templates, which we're in the process of having drafted for various subtopics within the general plan. We hope to have things available that you can pull offline and conform and make changes for your local jurisdictions. So we're hoping to make this process easier. If you haven't already participated and are interested in it, this is very much a work in progress right now at OPR, and we encourage your participation. Turning from the general plans, and by the way, that we're hoping to tie to and are tying to the Geo Portal as well that I mentioned earlier. So the data will be available as part of the template process in the general plan guidelines. Last year, well, actually, before I get to that, SB 375, I know you're all familiar with that process and the move to transit-oriented development. The MPOs have done, the largest MPOs now are pretty much done with their first draft of the Sustainable Communities strategies, and the governor hates acronyms, so I'm working very hard to say the actual names of them, but it's really hard to remember some of these actual names. That's why we all go to acronyms. But at any rate, the Sustainable Community strategies are done for a lot of the largest MPOs. Now the question is, and this has always been the question under SB 375, how do we get local communities, many of whom you represent here, to be part of that process and to be consistent with those strategies? I think that's a difficult set of problems, and I understand some of the difficulties. But we're looking for routes to get there, because we think that the work that's been done on these SCSs is important and is really changing the development constructs in various regions. So we want to encourage locals to adopt it. So one route towards that, I think, has gone under the radar. I say the word CEQA with some trepidation, and I've worked on CEQA issues for 25 years, and I say CEQA with trepidation every time I talk about it. But last year there was a law, SB 226, that directed OPR to streamline infill development issues under CEQA. And what we did was to streamline activities that are consistent with the strategic community strategies, the sustainable community strategies. And we've done those regulations. They now exist. I'm actually hoping some of you are using them. We're monitoring as closely as we can. We want to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we want to know that, and then we'll go back and we'll fix it if we can. Meanwhile, just as an update, yes, CEQA is on the agenda again because we can never get enough of it here in Sacramento. I know I can't. There's another reform effort, and what I'm interested in, I think there's a bill now called SB 731, which is Steinberg's bill. I'm sure some of you are following it. I am interested in something that's not really in there yet, but I want to promote the idea of looking very carefully at level of service. Level of service, I'm sure many of you know, as part of CEQA, anytime you have an infill development, it probably reduces the level of service, and that forces a full environmental impact report review. Well, it's also true that Greenfield development, even if it generates way more vehicle miles traveled, often has a less obvious immediate impact in the local area on congestion. And that means that Greenfield development has a very significant advantage over infill development. I really think we need to look at that very carefully. Maybe we should be thinking about what vehicle miles traveled are generated by the project rather than the immediate piece of congestion that an infill project would create as opposed to a greenfield project. I throw that out there. I know with CEQA, people have very many opinions. Okay, let me talk about some of the rural community issues, and I like to talk about those with reference to HighSpeed Rail, which is also a low controversy issue. I think of HighSpeed Rail probably differently than most people. I think the people moving function is all well and good, and that probably displaces some air travel and some travel on Highway 5, et cetera. But I think of it as sort of a planning principle and an organizing principle for the state. We're going to have a high-speed rail system going through the center of the state, right through lots of areas of prime farmland, and by the way, the area of the state that is expected to grow the most over the next couple of decades. Well, we could have a system that allows, sort of the usual sprawl, or maybe we could be a little smarter this time and really put some time and effort into how we plan communities and how we do transit-oriented development and connectivity, and use this as a moment to identify the farmland that we want to protect as farmland into the next 100 years that, by the way, may be rather important for climate change, so that we have places to grow food that are the best. And maybe we can at the same time think about what open space needs to be preserved as we build communities that have higher densities but are designed and developed in ways that are better ways to live. So my hope is that that is the route that we pick with high-speed rail. And I think, you know, I know that OPR and the Strategic Growth Council are going to be spending a fair amount of time in this coming year working, starting with Fresno and Palmdale and some of the other cities that are along this route, to start talking about how we do this and getting resources to those places so that we can do it in an intelligent way. So you can keep us honest on that. The next on my list is renewables and electric vehicle infrastructure. Let me just touch on that. I know that those are huge topics. I just want to mention the distributed generation. The governor has a goal of 12,000 megawatts by 2020. I include in that things like battery storage, which I think have a lot of implications for local governments, for energy efficiency, for shaving peaks, and all the kinds of things that we deal with. And I'll note that there's a new proceeding at the PUC that's a result of AB 2514 that is, for the first time ever in the U.S., setting a procurement target. Potentially, it's a proceeding in progress, but the idea is potentially to set a procurement target for storage. That changes a lot of things about the commodity of electricity, potentially, because electricity is one of the only commodities that you can't really store. There are ways, of course, to do it under certain circumstances, but for the most part, the load and the electrons have to match, and when you have that obligation, it makes it a very complex set of regulatory and market-based solutions to try to address energy needs. If we can have storage as part of the mix, then you change the relationship to the commodity. So this is an important proceeding that I wanted to mention. Electric vehicles, the incredibly difficult and important piece of what we're all doing is to try to electrify the transportation system. There are a lot of pieces to that, but electric vehicles in California are one of the biggest. We're going to have about 50,000 electric vehicles on the road in California by the end of the year. That's not nothing. California is the third largest auto market in the world behind the US and China. So we actually have some impact, but in order to have EVs in a meaningful way, we have to have infrastructure that allows people to get over range anxiety and the things that go with that. OPR is finishing up on something called the ZEV, the Zero Emission Vehicle Readiness Guidebook, and we're working with local governments to identify infrastructure issues, planning and zoning, permitting, how you green local fleets, and ways to encourage consumers. If you're interested in that, we'll be coming out with a draft very shortly. A couple more things and then I'll shut up. On energy efficiency, I wanted to mention, if some of you, I think, may be aware of the efforts in the city of Claremont in Los Angeles County. They started something called CHIRP. A gentleman named Devin Hartman is behind that. CHIRP used to stand for Claremont Home Energy Retrofit Program. It now stands for California Home Energy Retrofit Program because he's expanded it. They're now in Sacramento and are going to try to move statewide. It's sort of an amazing effort. And what they did in Claremont's a bit of a unique community. It's fairly affluent and it's connected to, it's a university town. So it has some attributes that are not replicable. But what they did is they started with a goal that they're going to retrofit 1% of the housing stock. And they've already well surpassed that. They've now reset the goal to be 10%. And what they did was really focus on whole energy audits for houses, working very directly with contractors, and a lot of education for realtors, for assessors, for the contractors, and for homeowners. and they've been very successful with this program. They were also very, very good at helping people figure out the rebates that were available. So they've been quite successful with this program out of the box, and it'll be very interesting to see if they can have similar success in Sacramento and move beyond that. Okay, so I want to mention one last thing and then take any questions that people might have. At OPR, we are working with the local government commission directly on an effort in connection with AmeriCorps. Some of you may know that AmeriCorps has funding to bring professionals into various circumstances that might not otherwise be available. And so what we've decided to do is to see if we can develop a program with the local government commission to bring planning and climate professionals into communities in California. And we're aiming to get about 85 folks for about a year to go into various communities. So we're hoping to, it's in progress, been working on it for about a year, and we're honing in on the specific proposal. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We're not ready to say we're going to be able to do it yet, but I'm hoping that we will. And if we will, we'll come back to you with details, and hopefully you'll be interested in participating. So let me stop there. There's endless things to talk about, but maybe we should talk about something you all want to talk about.
Great. So thanks, Ken. Does anybody have a comment or a question?
Hi, I work for San Leandro. We have a fairly efficient, redevelopment staff. They did a lot of actual infill support, energy efficiency for low or moderate income. So what is the governor's plan to replenish the resources that we had through that arm of our government?
Last year, the governor vetoed a series of redevelopment bills. On one of them, which I think was 811, he wrote a fairly encouraging veto message, which was something to the effect of, I think you're on the right track, you're looking at infill in a narrower way, but I have no idea what the impact of this bill is on the existing redevelopment set of statutes. So, let's go back to the drawing board and work this through. So that bill was reintroduced as SB 1 Steinberg, and there are discussions ongoing. So if you're interested in redevelopment, as I'm sure many of you are, I encourage you to follow SB 1 and to participate in that process to see how it develops. Because it will not surprise any of you to hear, because it's a Steinberg bill, that the outlines of it have some connection to SB 375. So there may be some interesting synergy between redevelopment funding and how we encourage local communities to participate in the sustainable community strategy concept.
I'm going to take an opportunity to ask you a question that has nothing to do with what I work on, but since you brought it up.
Identify yourself.
This is Meredith Youngheim. I work at the CPUC. I'm moderating a panel this afternoon. I was excited to hear you speak about growth planning around HighSpeed Rail, and it sounds like potentially we could be leaning towards a Portland-type model around the corridor of high-speed rail in the southern Central Valley, and I'm wondering if you think we could develop a model that might actually have some teeth in terms of visioning for preserving agriculture and smart growth, and if that's where you're thinking this could possibly go.
A couple of things. First of all, a little plug for Meredith. She works on water and energy issues, a rather big subject which needs more attention. So that's why she's here. What does high-speed rail planning look like? Well, let me mention two things. First of all, what local governments in the area think it should look like is extremely important, essential to figuring out what the vision is. We are not interested, really, in having the state come in and say, gee, the Palmdale area should look like this. We're interested in providing some tools and encouragement and in setting out maybe some broad principles to help with that planning effort. There are some statewide goals and interests as well. And one way that we're thinking about it is pretty complicated but quite interesting. There's something called RAMP, which stands for Regional Advanced Mitigation Planning. This is the idea that there are infrastructure projects that are coming. There are things like high-speed rail, like freeway expansion, like sewer plants, et cetera, large-scale infrastructure that we all know are coming in various areas. Why do we need to wait for them to do mitigation? Can we tie this to some form of mitigation banking, but meanwhile, can we identify the areas of open space, the areas of prime farmland that need to be preserved for all kinds of reasons, and start buying those, start doing the mitigation, and as the major projects then come online, those mitigation dollars that are associated with those projects would then be credited towards the mitigation that's done on a regional basis. Well, there are a myriad of complexities that are associated with that approach, but high-speed rail is the exact place to try this because of the size and nature of the project. So the answer is the vision that you just identified, I think, is where we would like to head and have buy-in with locals as they think about what their future looks like. But also tie it together with some of this larger scale regional planning.
This is just way in advance, maybe 2050 that you're talking about, an electric vehicle. I just made a trip to Boston. Every time I hit the freeway, I had to pay a toll. But here in California, we do not pay toll. We pay gas tax to maintain our highways. So I'm talking about if you're promoting this electric vehicle and people are not paying taxes, then we're probably going to compromise this funding availability for maintaining our transport highways.
Could you identify yourself too, please?
I'm sorry?
Your name?
My name is Mo Lasai. I'm with the City of Oceanside in northern San Diego County. Thank you.
As you move from gas-fired vehicles to electricity-driven ones, how do you maintain something like the highway system, which is still extremely relevant? Right now, I mentioned 50,000 vehicles. That's a drop in the bucket to the 14 million that are on the whatever it is that is on the road in California. It's probably more than that. So right now, I think the more important issue and the greater difficulty is moving people into electric vehicles. That doesn't mean, and so right now I don't think people are saying, oh, we've got to figure out at this moment what the tax base is because of this massive change to electric vehicles and how do we support the transportation system. Over time, we need to figure out that mechanism. And there will be a mechanism because people, you can remember that of all the taxes that the public has ever passed in the state of California, many of them, if not most, had transportation as their purpose. So I suspect that the more this becomes an issue, in a way, the better, because it means we'll be having success in converting to electric vehicles. So it's a problem that I hope to have and address.
Great. Cal Broomhead, City of San Francisco. I wanted to ask you what role you can take in terms of looking at climate mitigation and climate adaptation so that when we're doing adaptation projects in the state, that those will also contribute to mitigation?
It's funny, in my notes for this, the one thing that I cut at for purposes of time was adaptation and preparedness, mostly because Michael McCormick is here from OPR, and that's very much his focus. So I apologize for cutting that out because it is an enormously important piece of what the state is doing, and I know from very specific interactions with ARCA that regions and cities are doing. I think that any distinction between mitigation and what we now, I think, are calling preparedness rather than adaptation, but we haven't quite figured that out yet, is artificial. I think mitigation and preparedness are part of a whole. That now when we build things, we have to think about resilience and preparedness. Local governments, as part of emergency and hazard planning, have to think about adaptation. We're going to, by the end of the year, we anticipate a very extensive update to the state's adaptation policies, and central to all of that are clearly local governments and what you all do on those issues. So you'll be hearing quite a lot from the state and from the governor directly in the next few months.
Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you, Ken. And we'll go on to the next part.
Thank you very much.